So, Marlene, today I have Marlene Sharp and Judi Uttal with me. And we are, so I found you guys on the internet. I was looking for guests for the show, and I had come across Marlene, and you had worked for, you had worked with Sega, you had worked with Disney, and you also own your own production company, Pink Poodle Productions.
That's
And
right.
I reached out to you, and I have an autistic son here, and he's, the pride and joy of my life, but I'm always looking for resources and learning and trying to learn as much as I can about autism. And that's when you had brought up that hey, you actually have a colleague who works with autism and entertainment, and that's you, Judi. And so I've been looking forward to this conversation for a couple months now.
Hooray, us too. Yes,
So
we love to meet our fans.
so
Well,
when
and
you
and other parents. No.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about. Is for me, it's actually like for I love to talk, and since I have been a stay-at-home dad, I mentioned this before we started recording, that I've been a stay-at-home dad for the last 10 years, and five of those last 10 years, I've we had a son who was diagnosed with autism, and like I said before, I'm always looking for resources. And I'm always trying to learn as much as I can about autism, how to care for loved ones with autism. And basically, my job as a parent, I believe, is to make sure that my children can survive without me so that when I leave, essentially, my kids can take care of themselves and pass that on to future generations. And I always worry about that. And when I had reached out to Marlene, and she said that she was actually doing some work with our autism and entertainment, that it immediately perked my brain because like my little guy is so um he's so smart and he's so energetic and he's so entertaining. It just made me think, wow, that could be maybe something that he might be interested in when he's older, and networking as a podcaster and meeting people and parents, talking to other parents and other parents, especially who've had the struggles that I've had. That's what it's all about.
Yes, most
Well,
definitely. Networking is key for a lot of professions, but especially in entertainment.
So,
I can. Oh, go ahead.
oh
Sorry.
no, you go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say that I too am a parent of an autistic son. He's now 32. So I understand the journey and wanting the best for your child. And I got on my path through also researching or new treatments or new opportunities to deal with the challenges that my son Josh was having as he exited high school. So that was kind of a starting point of my journey running a nonprofit that eventually led me to this autism and entertainment area.
That's awesome. I like my little guy, he's 5, and just
Ah,
to just to kind of clear the air here, like we're going to step on each other occasionally because this is internet phone call, and you guys are actually on the West Coast, whereas I'm in the Midwest, and so we're going to step on each other from time to time when we go to speak, but I'm going to try my best to alleviate some of that. Um, but yeah, my little guy is 5, and I do worry about, how is he going to support himself as he gets older, and that's one of the primary focuses of educating myself so I can help him succeed later on in life.
right. Yeah, when they're 5, you don't know what the future is going to bring. And when you first get that diagnosis, it's you have no idea what the path is going to look like for your child. The good thing is every year they learn, they get more independent, they build skills, and you watch them evolve. And on the side, on this side of it, with my son being 32, he graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a B+ average in television and film. He lives in a condo that's about a mile from our house. He drives.
Save 10 minutes via San Bernardino Freeway.
And so he lives a good life. Is it ideal? No, but every year I see more joy, more independent skills, and so I just want to say to you that you will be successful, your son will be successful, and the journey will be very exciting. It'll be different than the journey that maybe somebody who had a neurotypical child will have, but it certainly is a wonderful journey, and you'll meet wonderful people and learn as you grow and as your son grows.
Yeah, I'd noticed when we were given our diagnosis, or my son's diagnosis, it wasn't some people, and I don't know if you've experienced this on your journey, but some people look at the downsides and doom and gloom type of things when they think of autism, or spectrum disorders, um, things like that. We didn't really think of it like that. We kind of knew that maybe he was a little autistic from early on, and then when he got his diagnosis, it was more of like a confirmation type of thing. And now that we have a diagnosis, we know how to treat a little bit better. But I like to say that we embrace it, and we embrace the challenges that come along with it. My son's verbal, so it's not as challenging as I thought it was going to be, because when I was younger, my stepbrother, he was nonverbal. He's still nonverbal, but he was a teenager, and it was very difficult to communicate with him. So I was kind of used to that. But my son, it's not completely different, but it's a lot easier to communicate with him because he is verbal.
When Josh was diagnosed, it was, let's say, 1994, and the world was a lot different back then. This was back in the day where maybe it was 1 in 200. It was not something that was diagnosed. It was not like 1 in 36 that it is now. And the services, there were no services available. And so I consider myself one of those pioneers who, help build the infrastructure, and that you're able to enjoy with your son because of the people that came before you who and who helped, whether it's making sure that ADA is covered by insurance, or making or knowing that there's support groups out there for you. All those things are a result of the pioneers that came before you, who laid the groundwork that will make your journey so much easier than perhaps other people were. But we had to, when with raising Josh, he must have done about 10 or 15 different therapies, but they were always me saying, this sounds interesting, maybe this will help. Or I was making videos to help him learn how to conjugate verbs and understand before and after, and all the different things that he was challenged with. So it's you're living in a time now where autism, I think, is more accepted, and that hopefully by the time your son grows up, the projects that we're working on with autism and entertainment will flourish, and your son will have a much easier time of it than maybe some of the young people are today.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that too, because you're right. It is quite a bit more accepted now than it used to be. Not necessarily accepted, but a diagnosis makes things easier, I guess. There's more knowledge, there's more um, awareness is what I think that I could. There's more awareness out there about autism today than there was, in the 90s. Um,
Yeah.
and I absolutely think you're right. That helps out quite a bit because when I was looking for resources, it was a struggle finding resources where I live because we live in a medium-sized city in the Midwest, and
Right.
when I say medium-sized, there's less than 100,000 people. I guess that could be considered a small city, but um, it was difficult finding resources where we live locally.
Right.
But then once I started looking for other parents who who um, had knowledge with the services that are available around here. Once I started reaching out to those other parents and having conversations with them, and they kind of tipped me along to um, some things that are available due to ADA laws and stuff like that. And so we actually we don't have ABA therapy. We have we have a parent caregiver trainer who
Uh-huh.
teaches us some ABA ideas without calling it ABA. It's some kind of funding stuff that they don't like to use the term ABA for some reason. But it's funny that you mentioned ABA therapy. And in the 90s, I've heard so many bad things about ABA therapy, and that initially turned me off of ABA or anything of the sort because it was essentially described to me as behavioral modification, and I don't want my little guy to be changed. I love him just the
Yeah.
way he is. Um,
Well, yeah, that's, in my opinion, that was bad branding. The, you know, I went to UCLA, and the father of what is now called ABA was Professor Dr. Ivar Lovaas. So, and living in Orange County, I lived near the hub of where it all came from. But when he got started, autism was like a diagnosis that would lead to just a life being um, institutionalized. So a person on the spectrum had a whole different future. And really what the fundamentals were was one-on-one teaching. And the idea was that the person on the spectrum didn't generalize learning, wouldn't sit there and observe and necessarily learn. And so it was taking all the curriculum that you would typically know by the time you were 5 years old and turning it into a series of discrete trials that would eventually build up and be generalized. And so really it was more about education and learning. Now, and that was the part that was really important. They're also going along with the autism diagnosis. So one was the ability to learn, but the other was maybe some behavioral issues. And those are things that parents deal with all the time. What do you do when my child tantrums? What do you do when my child won't eat? It's your typical parenting problems. And so there it really was using the latest in psychology techniques to help parents parent their children and be able to move forward. It's gotten a pretty bad name. And my son had some of the therapists that work with my child, or the young students, because we had to train people out of UCI at the time. Some of them were wonderful. And it really, my son was in one of his therapists' wedding, and he was the ring bearer, and she was just the most beautiful, wonderful person. And in general, he loved many of his therapists, but there was one who was the most effective with him, but she also was more harsh, you know, and for him, he did have negative feelings about it, and when he graduated from UC, Cal State Fullerton, I had him write thank you notes to all the different people that he had worked with throughout his time growing up. And he wrote a letter to this person, and he told her how he felt and how he really, she really frustrated him. And anyway, what ended up happening is they ended up talking, and she said, I had no idea that was how you felt. And, you know, they kind of talked it through, but it was all for him. You know, when he started, I was counting his vocabulary. He had no words. He had no, you know, he didn't understand concepts. And it was through that he was able to develop it. As this population ages and they become, you know, part of the reason for the success of this generation of autistic young people has been because they've been able to break through the challenges that they had when they were young. And now they're articulate, bright, capable people. And so now they're at the other end of this, and now they're having trouble finding work. And just to close off this ABA discussion, so one of Dr. Ivar Lovis's students was a woman named Dr. Doreen Graham-Pouchet, who founded CARD, the Center for Autistic Related Disorders, which was the service that we work with, was like the first of the programming for therapy, ABA therapy, that was out there. And it grew to have offices all over the world. And when Marlene and I were working on our conference that was last April, we needed some additional money. And so I contacted her, surprised that she remembered me, but she did. And she ended up giving us some funding to pay for some aspects of the conference. But she and I spoke and said, you know, it was because of the help that you gave this community that they're now at a point where they're can be constructive members of society and be working and have talent. And so it was good that she got an opportunity to give back and help our program.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think you touched on something that's it may be important to remember about ABA. When they did write the books and come up with the ABA, it was important. It's important to remember that they wrote and did things based on the knowledge that they had at the time. And ABA over the years has changed. It has evolved. There's more knowledge. And in my experience with the parent caregiver trainer that we have, he's not teaching us ABA. He's just giving us learning tools so that we can learn how to teach our son the things he needs to know to become a contributing member of society. The lessons that I've learned is it is basically just psychology that can really be used on anybody, but it's particularly helpful because it's specific. And
yeah
and some of the things that we're working on are very targeted. Like we're working on pronouns right now. He's 5 and working on pronouns. I wasn't working on pronouns when I was 5. But it's so he can conceptualize gender identity, not gender identity for politics sake, but for so that he can recognize I'm a boy, mom's a girl, and mom is a she, and dad is a he. I am him, she is her. Those type of things, like
Yeah.
identity and having a sense of self and self identity. And that's what we're working on now. Like the kid's 5. I wasn't into that until I was like 12, you know? So it's been
Yeah,
very, go ahead.
yeah, no, and then to help your listeners, and we probably should move on to some other topics, but it basic, it was based on Pavlovian theory about positive reinforcement. So, and not every, we CARD was not our first ABA organization. We tried somebody else and we really didn't like them. So you, as a parent, you need to be mindful of the quality of the curriculum and the quality of the therapists that you're working with. And you need to say, I don't agree with how they're approaching it, because not it's just like taking your car in to be serviced. Not every service guy that's going to service your car is going to be the same. And not every person that's going to work with your child is going to be the same. And you need to have your antenna up and be aware if something's not a good fit. But it's either positive reinforcement or there can be negative reinforcement or punishment. And the best, the more that you want is to be using positive reinforcement, whether it's compliment, it starts off with candy or prizes or points or whatever. And it's when somebody decides they're going to use punishment or negative reinforcement that some of the frustrations or anger can build up. That might be where ABA might get a bad name. So anyway, probably when you
Yeah,
were going to talk to Marlene, you didn't imagine you were going to be working down this topic, but
oh no, it's perfectly fine. That's actually what the podcast is all about. Like this is just a conversation between us people here. We're all just people, and right now, I mean, like I don't get the opportunity to talk to people like you very often. So anytime, any chance that I can get to bring up topics that I'm curious about, like we're gonna do that on the podcast because that's what we're here for. um but yeah, I to give the audience kind of an example of what you're talking about. If anybody's seen the show The Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon is trying to
I
train
lose you.
Penny with chocolates and uh, a spray bottle, negative and positive reinforcement. That's essentially what you were talking about. And yeah, but it actually works on everybody. And that's what I've noticed in the training that I've received is it's more about communication and learning how to communicate with your loved one and teach them the things that they need to know to be uh, productive members of society. But I actually think you're right with the negative views of ABA was probably more based on the positive and negative reinforcement and who you're working with, and that's very important for parents to be
Yeah.
vigilant and be our children's advocate. Speaking of advocates and being an advocate, you have worked alongside Disney. You have worked alongside Nickelodeon. Marlene, also worked with Disney and you've worked with Sega. And that's actually why I reached out to you in the first place, is you've worked with Sega in the development of Sonic the Hedgehog, correct?
Yes, I have.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've worked with a number of different companies that, excuse me, are the owners of intellectual properties that appeal to young men, boys action properties, a lot of them video game and toy driven. And so Sega was one of my employers, although I continue to do consulting here and there for Sega and subsidiaries. But I when I worked full time for Sega, I was brought on as producer on the second season of Sonic Boom, which was or is it's a series that started out in the US on Cartoon Network. It's still available for viewing on Netflix. And
I've
during the
seen it many
period,
times.
okay, okay, great. During the period that I was working for Sega, we were also experiencing the 25th birthday of Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sega had just gone through a major restructuring in the US and downsized from a huge San Francisco office to a skeleton Burbank office. And so I was part of that skeleton Burbank office. So as a result, I and my coworkers, we wore a lot of hats. So in addition to working on the second season of Sonic Boom, I worked on Sonic's humongous birthday party at Comic-Con 2016, which will live on in infamy on Twitch and various other streaming platforms. And Sonic's induction into the Video Game Hall of Fame, and worked with a lot of licensees. We also did a collaboration with Cartoon Network and the series OKKO, which was in production at the time. OKKO wanted to have Sonic and Tails guest star as cartoon characters on that series. So unbeknownst to the viewing audience at home, that entails a whole lot of negotiation and hand wringing and pearl clutching and discussions. And so I was part of that venture. And then also the Sonic movie 1 was in development at that time. So one of the things I did was create a plan for how a vision for how consumer products might roll out a lot, excuse me, alongside the development and leading up to the movie. So I actually ended up leaving Sega before the movie came out, but it was really hugely gratifying to see various Easter eggs planted in the movie that I mean, it wasn't just me. I had lots of people collaborating with me, but things that we had discussed in years prior, there they were on the big screen. And yeah, so, and then actually just to tie it all together, there was a colliding of worlds that happened at our recent Autism and Entertainment Conference, because one of my very close collaborators at Sega, who is still at Sega, Jasmine Hernandez, she works very hard on all of the Sonic shorts. And back in the day, we worked together on the Sonic Mania adventures, but she's gone on to bigger and better things through the years, but she's still at Sega. She came and she spoke on the video game panel that I moderated at the Autism and Entertainment Conference. And one thing that we noticed a lot, because Sega is really great at engaging with its fan community, and to the point where Sonic Mania is a game that was essentially made by fans. So there was a fan-led development team that were hired professionally to develop the game. And so Jasmine on our Autism and Entertainment panel spoke very eloquently about the ways that Sonic engages with the community and how it is possible to turn your fan art and your fan experience or your fan games or what have you into a job at Sega. And that's one of the things that Sega is really good at, and that I believe that there are a number of fans on the spectrum who are very active in the Sonic the Hedgehog fan community, and that's where a lot of the creativity comes from.
Yeah, you can tell Sega honestly cares what their fans think, and actually has good feelings for their fans when when they changed the movie, when the character didn't live up to expectations and they changed the movie.
Yes.
That was really special actually to me, because it means they were listening, and that means a lot. So
Yes.
how did you get hooked up with Autism and Entertainment?
Oh, so I started working with another autism nonprofit, excuse me, in Los Angeles called the Center for Learning Unlimited back in 2020. So I come to autism through animation and through the show business angle. I don't have a child on the spectrum. but I'm definitely aware of the need and the community and all the things that are going on. But I don't have a personal stake as Judi does. But a friend of mine was teaching at the Center for Learning Unlimited back in 2020, and she invited me to have a few conversations with the administration there because they had a program for adults on the spectrum to learn about animation as a potential career choice. And their program was relatively new. And during the pandemic, there was a general panic that broke out because the program was thrown into upheaval, as were most things in the world. It had been an in-person program, and then suddenly it was online, and the students were navigating through that. And so my friend called me and said, we're about a year from graduating our first class, and we don't know what will happen after that. So could you please talk to the administration and tell them everything's going to be okay, and there's plenty of jobs and this, that, and the other. And I was like, well, I mean, I could do that, but I don't know. I mean, I'd be making up stories, maybe. I don't know. But I'm happy to talk with anybody and just tell them about my experience and what I know. So that just led to a series of conversations with the administration, and then they engaged me as a consultant for the program, which was largely focused on life drawing and learning Maya, which is one of the CGI software packages. Those were the two main things that the program was working on, but there wasn't really anything bridging the gap between academics and employment. And so I just came on as the person to fill that gap. And so I was flying by the seat of my pants for sure. But I figured, like, okay, everybody in the entertainment business needs networking, whether you're on the spectrum or not. So let's have bunches of guest speakers from the industry just become aware of what's going on here. So I went crazy scheduling guest speakers like once a week for like maybe 3 years straight. We had hundreds of guest speakers, and it was really great. I mean, most of them were animation experts, but some of them were experts in animation adjacent fields, such as forensic crime scene recreations through animation. We had someone who was an expert in pharmaceutical animation for the medical industry. And then we had writers, we had actors, we had creative executives, PR executives. So the first set of guest speakers were four of my former Sega colleagues. And oh my God, my students wanted to adopt them. We couldn't get off of that Zoom. That was we did most of the presentations were through Zoom. But yeah, so then about halfway through my tenure there, we opened a studio for the graduates of the program. So we graduated the first class, and then we put them to work in Brainstorm Productions, which is a professional studio for hire. And the main artists are the graduates of the program with supervision and some instruction. It's almost like it is considered transitional employment, or almost like a paid internship. We have an agreement with Harbor Regional Center where 4 hours of work is subsidized through Harbor Regional Center, and then there are 2 hours of instruction on an ongoing basis for graduates of the 3-year program. And then I was basically business development. So I would bring in paid projects for the studio. So we worked on short films and posters and music videos, a variety of different things. And none of them were huge money makers, but we made some good contacts. We got a little bit of income that we could then use to build out the studio more and more. And so that's how I came to being involved with the autism community. And then Center for Learning Unlimited, also known as CLU, and Brainstorm, which are linked, we received a grant from the Department of Developmental Services of California for a research study about remote job coaching for people on the spectrum. And our grant coincided with Judy's grant that she received to do the first ever Autism in Entertainment conference. And so just Judi and I were moving in parallel lines, and we knew a lot of the same people but had not met. And then just at a certain point, I decided to stalk Judi and I decided to hunt her down and find out what she was doing, because I am the world's biggest busybody, and I just couldn't stand it that there was this conference going on and I didn't know anything about it. So then I just sort of came into the group and then became the head of PR and sponsorships. And so now I work with Judi on PR and sponsorships on an ongoing basis for the next conference, which fingers crossed will happen next year. And then also the parent organization of Autism and Entertainment is called Orange County Asperger's Support Group. So that's the group that actually got the grant for the conference. And so those two entities are linked, and so I work with Judi on that too. So thank you, Judi.
Thank you, Marlene.
So that's really, really awesome that there was a blind spot essentially brought to your attention, and you stepped up to the plate and were like, "Hey, let's see if we can do something about this." I admire that. You took action, and that's what it takes. And as far as having a personal stake in the game, you do now. You have a personal stake in the game
That's
now.
right. That's
So,
right.
you guys actually, Autism and Entertainment just, you guys just did a thing out at San Diego Comic-Con. Is that correct?
Yes, we
Now,
did.
that for the
Wait a
people
minute.
that,
I'm wearing my Judi, I don't know if
hey,
I showed you this when we were in San Diego, but I'm wearing a different shirt today. I usually wear my Autism and Entertainment shirt, but
I
today
really
I'm just
like the
wearing my
font of that.
Comic-Con. Yeah, I know. I love it. This is official Comic-Con merch. So we are grateful for Comic-Con. So let's give them a shout out. Thank you,
And
Comic-Con.
for
Yay.
those of you that don't know, San Diego Comic-Con is kind of a big deal. I believe it's the biggest Comic-Con there is, correct?
I think so. I think
I think
so.
it was the first one, and it's now since the biggest. If I
Well,
remember correctly, but San Diego Comic-Con either way is a huge deal. And now this goes to either one of you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Judi,
yeah,
do you want to
I,
say?
I'll, I'll start, but Marlene was very key. So we got the money for the grant and we started working on the conference. And we had a very strong creative team, and we decided that one of the things we could produce to inspire both the goal of the conference, our conference, was to increase employment of individuals on the spectrum in the entertainment space. And one of the things we wanted to do was to create documentaries, little short documentaries that would demonstrate the strength and the skill set of this community for employers. And the first one, or the second one we did, ended up being about an actress, animator named Danny Bowman. And Danny is famous for being one of the celebrities in the first and second season of Love on the Spectrum. So we had a crew that was basically people on the spectrum who were filming and editing these films and directing. And then they were led by a seasoned producer, director, filmmaker, Paul Hemstreet, who had been a senior vice president at Warner Brothers for over 23 years in the creative side. And so we made this film about Danny. And when Marlene joined us, she brought so much to the party, but one of the things she did was she brought in this expertise about film festivals. And so she entered us in a whole bunch of different film festivals, one of which was Comic-Con. And I should let Marlene kind of continue with the story from there, since it was really her expertise that got us to the San Diego Comic-Con, which I want to say had 160,000 people there a couple weeks ago. So it was a huge event.
Yeah, a lot of thousands, many thousands of people converging on San Diego. But yeah, as far as Comic-Con goes, I'm a frequent Comic-Conner for my various jobs through the years. Of course, with Sego, we always had a presence at Comic-Con, but other jobs that I've had through the years, Comic-Con is very important, a very important marketing venue for big brands, especially the superhero universes and so forth. And so Danny Bowman, the subject of one of our documentaries, she's a frequent fixture of Comic-Con San Diego, but other Comic-Cons around the world, actually. And this is depicted in the Netflix series Love on the Spectrum. They actually follow her on dates at various Comic-Cons, and she's cosplaying and everything. So I knew that I wanted to submit at least one of the films to a variety of competitions and film fests, because it is, in general, a great low-cost way of marketing and promotion. But I thought, well, Comic-Con would really be a good place to submit the one about Danny in particular, because she's a Comic-Con darling. So I just submitted, nothing special, didn't make any phone calls or whatever. I was fortunate in the sense that I had submitted to Comic-Con Film Festival before, and we had one of our Sonic Boom episodes was in Comic-Con Film Festival. I believe it was 2016 or 17. So I mean, I had that in my background, and I hoped that maybe somebody would realize that, but otherwise I wasn't, I just submitted the application online like thousands of other people, and we were chosen. And it was really a wonderful experience, because when I had participated back during the Sega days, that ended up being just one of many activations that we were a part of. So I didn't attend the festival. I was doing other stuff at other booths and whatever. So I didn't know how great it was other than the bragging rights. But this time, Judi and I and Paul Hemstreet and Julian Grachek, who's the co-director, editor, cinematographer, also on the Spectrum, and his mother and Danny and her family, we all were able to go from Los Angeles down to San Diego and participate. So we were in the audience watching the film, experiencing it with the fans of Danny Bowman, who were out in force, clapping for her and screaming her name, which was really cool. And then we had a panel afterwards at which we displayed some gifts that we got from Mattel, including this lovely gentleman right here. And thank you, Mattel. So Mattel sent us a whole bunch of toys in hopes that our contingent would review the toys and say nice things about them, of course. No problem. We all love toys. We're all collectors, and in that sense. And so we brought the toys with us on stage, and Judy's husband, Dennis, it was Dennis, right, Judi, who made the sign? Or
that was Neil.
Neil. That's right. Neil, one of our planning committee members, made a sign that said Autism and Entertainment, Mattel, thank you for the toys. And so it was a magical day. It really was. We had we weren't even expecting to be on a panel. We thought maybe three of us would be able to say a few words after the screening, and that we were prepared for that, but we weren't prepared for the big Comic-Con to do the drop in the background and the table and the microphones and all this stuff. but we improvised pretty well, I think. Don't you think, Judi? We just took to that
Yeah,
Comic-Con
it worked out,
stage.
it worked out really well. And if people want to see the Danny Bowman video, they can visit autismandentertainment.org. Our interview is on our YouTube channel. So, I mean, our panel. Danny's uncle Patrick actually recorded the entire panel discussion, and that got recorded as well. So we're excited that people can share in that. And it's a really positive video, the one about Danny. She shares her 10 secrets to success in your area of passion. And they're really good lessons that are worthy of anyone watching and learning from. Things like show gratitude for what you have and more will come, or about don't fear failure, that everybody fails. It's part of learning and you need to move on. And a lot of really positive suggestions for people. So encourage people to watch that if they get a chance.
That's, man, that is impressive. I love every bit of that. The whole story of how autism and entertainment came to be, and all the way up to the San Diego Comic-Con and the documentary. That is a fantastic story. I could just imagine how that it must feel to watch something like that grow into fruition. And then when you were invited onto that panel, improvisation, I'm not very good at it myself, but I love surprises. So I would have made the best of it as well. That's really awesome. So when in that experience with Danny and was it heartwarming and uplifting to watch that as as the people were embracing Danny and Danny being at Comic-Con, and cheering her? And how did Danny respond to that?
Oh, Danny is such a professional and is so good and kind. A lot of times when people are asked the origin story of anything, they get it wrong. They give the wrong credit to the wrong person, or they tell the wrong story. Danny was so perfect in describing where the conference came from, how the video got made, who did what. She was amazing and so generous and kind. And I mean, that's part of her brand. That is part of who she is. And she was responsive to her fans. She was, any favor we had to ask of her or her amazing aunt and uncle, they were there for us. The award ceremony was on Sunday, and our panel showing was on Thursday, and many of us weren't going to be around on Sunday, but her and her aunt and uncle came to the award ceremony and were there with Julian to see who won awards. We didn't win, but it meant a lot to Julian to be there with Danny and her family. So couldn't ask more of somebody, and she is always there. It's amazing how productive and capable and eloquent she is. She's just an amazing person. I'm sure Marlene can add to that.
Oh yeah, we love Danny, and I've actually known her for many years. Not well. I've gotten to know her better over the last year and a half, but she is an animation phenom. So I became aware of her when she invited me to be friends on Facebook when she was like, I want to say 11 years old. She was a child and she was seeking out women role models in the animation industry because she loved animation. And then when she was the ripe old age of 14, she opened up her own animation studio with the help of Sandy and Patrick, her aunt and uncle. And she's been very active in women in animation through the years. And that's really where I met her in person, was at various women in animation events and so forth. And she was just totally authentically loves animation and fandom and fan cons and all that stuff. So I knew of her and had met her before this year, but this last year and a half with Autism and Entertainment really got to know her a lot better. And she's a wonderful person, very generous and smart and so well prepared for everything, and such an exemplary business person. She actually has an MBA, and her bachelor's degree. She has I want to say it's something related to animation, but yeah, she's very well rounded. She's business savvy and creative. And
she's actually working on a PhD right now.
Yes.
Wow.
And her focus is on her work helping the autism community, how she can help the autism community, which is exciting. And she's doing projects for Stanford. She is a phenom.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was
That's
also
amazing.
a pleasure to submit her film for various film festivals and awards, because she was the only girl that we covered in our documentary series. And not that was a conscious choice or anything, but anyway, that's the way it turned out. And since Judi and I are girls, we feel close to the girlness of the entertainment industry and everything. And it was just really nice to further promote what she's doing and set her forth as an example for not just people on the spectrum in the industry, but just women in the industry. And yeah, she's opened a lot of doors for people on the spectrum as well as women, but she practices what she preaches.
Female empowerment is actually one of the things it's actually quite important to me. Not for obvious reasons. Um, so my wife allows me to be a stay-at-home dad. I've been a stay-at-home dad for the last 10 years, and we wouldn't be able to do that if she didn't have a career. And I actually look at it as more of a means of survival than equality. Um, I believe everyone should be self-sufficient and be able to take care of themselves. So I definitely appreciate that. Just a couple more quick questions, and I'll let you guys get out of here because this has been a quick hour. Um, so Judi, so what was Comic-Con like for you? Had you ever experienced anything like Comic-Con? I've never been to a Comic-Con myself, but I'm a Comic-Con fan, if that makes sense. Like I watch from afar. So, what was Comic-Con like for you, and had you experienced it before?
I had gone to it before with my husband and son. We went down for one day and just kind of wandered around the exhibits. This time I spent more time going to the sessions. And that was what was exciting about it to me this time, was I have no idea how many sessions are going on in parallel. Marlene, you might know the stat, but there were hundreds and hundreds of different sessions covering all sorts of different topics that were entertainment and related. I went to another session that was about autism in comics that was moderated by Britton Payne with Nickelodeon. And, it was just amazing to me how many people that were there that were huge fans. And I also thought the people there were just so nice. Everybody was just very friendly and nice. It was just a very positive, pleasant experience. And, just so much fun to see. There was so much advertising and so much promotion going on about everything, whether it was a TV show, animation, movie, food, I don't know, and everything seemed to be highlighted. Like Marlene had said, it's a huge marketing event.
Yeah, that's actually the industry as a whole, the entertainment industry, especially animation and kids entertainment is marketing. it's it's essentially marketing for toys. I love it. I love every bit of it. I'm way into consumerism and I love toys, and I'm actually more into that stuff as an adult than I was when I was a child. I was, into Hot Wheels cars and toy trucks and stuff like that. And Ninja Turtles were my biggest toy like that when I was a kid, and essentially that was all marketing. So I can definitely, I definitely know what that's all about. But I think if I went to the San Diego Comic Con, I'd be like starstruck because the costumes that people wear to Comic Con. I mean, I've seen pictures of like $5,000 costumes that people put together, and I'm like, wow, just that for that one weekend a year, and it's actually it's it's funny, but at the same time, I wish I was that passionate about things myself. I don't have anything like Comic-Con to look forward to like that, but one question for you, Marlene. In actually doing some research for this episode here, I had come across another podcast where you had discussed with this other person that you'd be interested in starting a true crime podcast. Is that moved anywhere?
Oh no. Well, funny you
I'm
should ask.
laughing because yeah, Marlene needs to tell you about our lunch last week.
So last week, last Friday, around this time, Judi and I had a lunch with somebody who's become a wonderful friend and an ally of Autism and Entertainment. Her name's Dea Lawrence, and she's the CMO of Variety, very esteemed trade publication for the entertainment industry. And our lunch was supposed to be about autism and entertainment and holding hands of Variety with Autism and Entertainment. That the magazine did a lot of great coverage for our conference, and we want to continue the joint venture. That was why we gathered. The first, I'd say, half an hour ended up being about true crime podcasts because Dea made the mistake. Well, I mean, she didn't know she was talking to me, who is obsessed with true crime, but she said that she spoke at CrimeCon. And I don't know if you are familiar with CrimeCon, but it's the Comic-Con for true crime lovers. And I've never been. So the way you feel about Comic-Con, I feel about CrimeCon. And Dea had just spoken. She had a panel. Variety is into the true crime space, which I had no idea. So anyway, poor Judi got a boot camp, a true crime boot camp during our lunch. But I encouraged Dea to share everything that she knew about true crime, what Variety was doing with true crime, what happened at CrimeCon, all that stuff. So to answer your question, though, and my dog speaks on this subject too, because yes, I have a whole format of a true crime series that is a plan but has never been put into action, and it involves my dog. It's called Dog on Crime, and it's about crime stories that involve dogs and like what happens to the dogs. Like sometimes the dogs are the heroes, and sometimes they're the victim, sometimes they're a witness. And so that I always want to know when I hear a crime story and there's a dog involved, like what happened to the dog? Like where is did someone adopt the dog, or was the dog taken to task, or whatever? And so that's my show. It hasn't become an actual show yet, but I do have a podcast with a friend of mine that's just a very simple interview show called Small Talk with Marlene and Chris. And Judy's been a guest on it, and we've been
I'm
doing
gonna
it
have
since
to
the
check that
beginning of
out.
this year. Yeah, I can send you the link to it. But the true crime podcast requires more heavy lifting than just a simple interview format. So my hope is one day to have a sponsor for that, or sponsors, so that I can really do a lot of research and, spend time on it. I could do so much better with a sponsor. So, but thank you. God love you for asking about it, because that is my passion, to see doggone crime become a reality.
I tell you what, I'm immediately intrigued. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, should we cut that out so that nobody steals that idea? Because like that's brilliant.
Oh,
I love
well,
that.
I don't think, well, I mean, I guess anything's possible. Somebody could steal it, but it was actually almost optioned. It was so it's out there, like, it's been presented to people. Unfortunately, the company that was interested in producing it got out of the original content production part of their business. So it fell through. But I have a paper trail that says this is my idea going back 2 years. So I'm not worried. I have a history
Okay.
in business and legal affairs too. I've got a tough attack dog who's part of this project, and as you can hear, she will testify anywhere that this is her vehicle, and it
That's
started with
awesome.
us.
Well, hey, I love the idea. That's such an awesome idea. Like I'm a true crime uh fan as well, but not necessarily like true crime podcasts, but like true crime stories, true crime books, stuff like that, like biographies, autobiographies, and like mysteries, stuff like that. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan. I the things that I'm interested in, and it's obvious in the show. Like I have very uh eclectic interests. Like I've talked from UFOs to now today we've spoke about true crime and animation, and so I'm a little bit all over the place when it comes to this podcast and subjects, but like that is such a great idea, because I bet there's a ton of stories out there, and there's a lot of people that think the same way, like what happened, what did they do with the dog, and because the dog's a
Yes.
big part of the story, but then they don't ever address what happens to the dog after the story. So
Yes. Yes, the
I
dog
I
shouldn't
love
be
that.
just a footnote. Especially there are some crazy stories of dog crime. Sometimes just like, for example, when Lady Gaga's dogs were abducted a few years back. That's a crazy story. The story of OJ, it's related to OJ Simpson, but it's what happened to Cato, the dog of Nicole Brown Simpson, who was actually the one who went and got a neighbor and then brought the neighbor to the crime scene. That's how the bodies were discovered, by Cato the dog. And it's like, well, what happened to this hero dog after, where's Cato's story? So, and there's a lot of examples and then funny stories too about there. I came across one story last year about a dog that kept showing up in a drive-through window. I think it was in the Midwest, like in the middle of the night, and realized that people were kind of sleepy, I suppose, when they were getting their midnight hamburgers or whatever, and would dump up and kind of like snatch bags and stuff. It was a dog that was escaping from somebody's house, and it was essentially stealing hamburgers from the drive-through window. So that's a case of a dog perpetrator. But there's a little ton of great tales about dogs and various
Oh,
transgressions.
that's another good name. You could call it Dog Tales.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah. There's so many.
Tales.
Yes.
That's
Yes, indeed.
awesome. Well, guys, I think I've tied up enough of your time today. I'd love to talk to both of you again. Do you mind if I reach out to you in the future, and we'll do this again sometime?
Oh, sure.
Awesome.
We'd be happy
Awesome.
to. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. Good luck. Have a wonderful weekend with your wife and your kids and your son.
Thank you. Thank you. And you too. You guys have a wonderful weekend. And I'm so proud of you guys for what you've done and accomplished. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you both for stepping up to the plate and not only raising awareness but doing something about it. You guys are especially Autism Entertainment. Like I want to talk about more about Autism Entertainment eventually, because you've got ties with Nickelodeon. You've done work with Nickelodeon, and something just random. I my son's name is Rocket, and there used to be a Nickelodeon TV show called Rocket Power. And, so this kid's last name was Rocket, and he was a skateboarder. And so everybody called him Rocket. And that was one of the things I was thinking about when I named my son Rocket. And he has autism, and you work with you do things with Autism Entertainment with Nickelodeon, and it's just it's if I didn't if fate worked in different ways, we might not work, we might not run into each other. And that's just an amazing thing, and I'm very proud of the things that you guys are doing. Keep it up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And we'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Woo!